Tim's American Beauty was made by Robust Tools, America's premier lathe manufacturer. Quality hardened tool rests and live centers too. Robust. Built to turn wood. Enjoyed for a lifetime.
Thompson Lathe Tools, made by a woodturner, for woodturners.
Welcome to the ugly side of my shop. You don't normally see this because my grinder's over here and some other crap that I have on the wall. But the thing about grinders is that it's kind of like watching paint dry. That's why I don't show sanding that much either. But I even show sharpening less because, you know, it's kind of boring to watch. But it is important. Unless you have a tool like me. Yeah, if you use a carbide like Easy Wood, you don't need a grinder. But if you have, I got a tool like me, this is a super high-speed, cryogenically treated piece of steel here, and you do have to sharpen it. So that's why you have a grinder. And I'm pretty sure if you're like me too, you don't have just one or the other. You got a combination. So it's nice to not have to sharpen. Whoa! But when you do have to sharpen, you do need to have a good grinder. And good grinder is kind of a relative term because I will be honest with you, this is an inexpensive grinder. And Rikon makes it, and they actually told me up front, they said this is an entry-level grinder. It's not that expensive, it's a bit over $100. So you get it, it comes with 2 wheels on it, you're ready to rock and roll right from the beginning. So the thing is that the way you set your grinder up is what's important, how it makes it work. There's a lot of variables to it. And as you can see, my grinder is actually sitting on a very old table here. This was, I think, in my dorm room back in college, years ago. And it held a TV, one of those fat ones. So I just brought it in here because I liked it. It's wood, it's on wheels. I have to move my grinder every now and then because of the TV business. Ideally, you want your grinder to sit on something that's stable so there's no vibration entered into it. But what I liked was I had the ability to put all the tools and toys I needed down here, and then down here I had even more space, and I can even store some stuff down in there and keep it out of the dust zone. That helps if you remember to shut the door occasionally, because that's why there's dust in there now. But anyway, let's just start about the basics of a grinder. Ignore all this stuff around it. This is what you call a low-speed grinder. It spins around 1500 RPMs. They're high-speed grinders that go about 3500 RPM. We don't like those in wood turning because the higher the speed, the faster it moves the steel from the tool, and the faster you wear away your tool. And if you're using certain metals, which we'll get into in a little bit, it can actually damage the metal of your tool and it won't cut very well after all. But anyway, so you have a low-speed grinder, and they come in different horsepowers. This one I think is a 1/2 horsepower, and one thing about the horsepowers is that there's not a lot of torque in the beginning. So you can turn this on and touch a tool to it and it'll stop it. You got to let it pick up speed. If you have a 1 horsepower, it has a little more oomph, right? But as long as that's spinning and you get your tool sharpened, it's okay. You can buy grinders that go all the way up to $1,500. And if you want to do that and that's your thing, that's great. I don't have a problem with that. It's like me, I'm not a tool snob. Use whatever you want. Nobody's going to ask you after you've turned, what tool do you use? They're going to say, that's cool, what wood is it, right? Same with a grinder. Nobody's going to ask you what grinder you're using. As long as you're turning and it's sharp and safe, you're rocking and rolling. Now the setup on most grinders is you have a coarse wheel over here on the left side, and the coarse wheel is for doing major shaping of a tool. If you want to reshape it dramatically and move a lot of steel, this will do it. Usually this is around 40 to 60 grit, and it will really tear the steel off. Over here is the finer wheel, and this is for more of the finesse. This is where you actually put the nice edge on the tool. And these go anywhere from, 80 to 120 grit. Currently I have 120 on here, and this wheel is actually getting a little bit old, and it's down to about 7.5 inches. And I really wanted to make a change, and I want to try a Norton wheel, which is a different wheel. So what we're going to do is start taking this apart, and as I take it apart, I'm going to show you some of the parts of the grinder. One thing, look right here. This little flange is a safety flange, and it's adjustable. So if I unscrew this, because I haven't adjusted it in a while, it should come all the way down. See, it touches the wheel. You bring it up barely above the wheel and then tighten it. That way, if anything breaks on the wheel, it's going to hit this and be contained in here, so it's not going to fly out and get you. The other part is these little shields are very handy too, because they keep, you can have sparks fly a long way sometimes, and if you better be wearing safety goggles when you work on this, but that just is one more layer of protection. When I do show sharpening on camera, I usually have it up because you can't see with it in the way for the camera. So anyway, do as I say, but not as I do. I'm gonna tighten that back because I don't want that getting in the way. Now over here, on this side, we have some screws, and 3 screws hold this plate on. So I'm gonna take off the top screw here. This is really easy to do. And what I want to do is show the inside of the grinder here. I'm probably going to show you, a lot of you, things that you already know, but some of you might not have a grinder yet. And this is the inside part. So that's number 3. Now I have to use a screwdriver on the first 2. I'm not sure why. There's probably a reason behind Rikon putting a little thumb screw over here. So you get that off of there. There we go. Make sure you hang on to all the washers and everything. Okay, now we're looking inside. And you can see it's a little dirty. Got some of the wheel in there still. But anyway, this is the shaft. This is the nut, and this is a flange. There's 2 flanges, and when you screw this nut on, it pinches the wheel in place. Now the thing that's interesting is that this nut is what they call a right-hand nut. So when you unscrew it, you're going to go counterclockwise. On the other side, it's a left-hand nut, so you're going to go clockwise to unscrew it. The reason is, as this is spinning, you don't want a regular thread so the nut will spin off. So this keeps the nut locked on in place on both sides, so it's turning against the direction of the wheel. That's a good safety thing. Now I'm going to grab a real antique here. It's my dad's old crescent wrench. But we want to take the wheel off. Now, one of the things that you want to make sure you do, and don't get yourself in trouble, is always unplug the grinder before you start messing with it like this, because I'd really hate to hit that on button while I'm doing something. That'd be bad. This is going to be interesting. Now, this crescent wrench is going to go right over this nut, right? Okay, now I'm just going to hold this with my hand. Oops, sorry, Brian, I bumped you. And I'm just going to gently turn. See how loose that nut is? You don't want this cranked on there so hard that you can't get it off, because if you do, you're probably going to crack your wheel. So we'll take this off. There we go. And here comes the flange, right? And here, Dean is the name of this wheel. It's a white wheel, and I'm going to explain something about that. And there it comes off. There's the other flange right there. So everything looks clean, so I'm going to just put that one back on there. This is a little dirty down here. Get some of that out. But have you noticed this right here, that little blue plastic thing? That's a sleeve, and it goes in there to actually make this fit on the shaft of the grinder, because you can see this is 5/8 of an inch, and this wheel was slightly larger, so it had to be made bigger to go in there. So this plastic sleeve is provided by the manufacturers to help you fill that gap. And that's an issue that we're going to talk about here in just a second too. But anyway, this white wheel is really interesting, because when I first started turning, high-speed steel was the norm. You could get regular steel tools also at that time. A regular steel tool was pretty soft steel, so it dulled quickly, it sharpened really fast because it was softer. High-speed steel came out, and it was a tougher steel. And the cool thing about that is the edge lasted longer. It also, well, it was harder to grind at that point, and that was where one of the issues came in. So you needed a wheel that when you sharpened on here, it didn't build up a lot of heat. So these white wheels are considered friable. So actually, you might even see a little groove in there right now. I don't know if you can, and I kind of cleaned it up. But the more you touch the metal to the wheel, the more the wheel fried away or broke away, giving you a fresh edge all the time. And it didn't build up a slick surface, so it didn't heat up the tool as much. If you heat up a high-speed steel tool, regular high-speed steel tool, you will untemper it. Basically, their strength is made through heating and cooling in a certain process. You heat the tip of that tool up way too fast, it's going to affect the strength of the steel. It might become brittle, it might become softer, and it messes up your tool. So then, when they started coming out with the really high-speed steels, the ones that have carbide and such like that in there, okay, all of a sudden now tempering's not an issue. You can get it as hot as you want. So you can go to a stronger, harder wheel so it doesn't fry away as much, so your wheel lasts longer and it's really quick to sharpen too. And so that is why I'm moving up to a blue wheel from Norton, because I now have all, really high-end, triple heat treated, cryogenically treated tools now. So I need a wheel that will match those tools. So this is an 80 grit, and this is going to be my fine grit wheel. So I pull it out here. This thing, they call it ceramic alumina. So it has ceramics in it. It has aluminum oxide in it. It is a really, really tough wheel. It will wear very slowly, but at the same time, it's made for those super strong steels that we have in our tools now. So they work together. They're a really good pair. You will notice too, they also provided me those little blue things, right? Well, the truth is, even though it's nice of them to provide them, you don't want them. Because think about this. This is going on to that grinder, and see the flex, see the gaps in there? Okay? Well, if they're in there, that's going to affect how the wheel runs. And you want the wheel to run true. In other words, you want no vibration, no wobble. And I'll show you how we're going to set that up in a minute. But anyway, the answer, first step we want to do though is, how do you see if a wheel is true? Because if you put this thing on here and start going at 1600 RPM and something's wrong, boom, that's not a good sight, right? So one of the old tests is, I'm just going to take a pair of pliers here and just balance this on the center, right? So let's just take a screwdriver. All nice sharp sounds, like a bell. If you get a thunk, then you have a problem with the wheel. There's either a crack in it or a void in it. Doesn't happen very often. These guys make good stuff. They know what they're doing, but it's always a good test, because even though it might leave the factory fine, by the time it's shipped and somebody with minimum wage throws it on a shelf and it gets dropped a few times, there might be an issue with it.
Tim's American Beauty was made by Robust Tools, America's premier lathe manufacturer. Quality hardened tool rests and live centers too. Robust. Built to turn wood. Enjoyed for a lifetime.
Thompson Lathe Tools, made by a woodturner, for woodturners.